I talked about how I became an LPN. I talked about my first job as an LPN, and I spent 11 years working as an LPN in that facility. And to be honest with you, I probably would have worked there until I died, which meant I probably would have become a resident there had I continued to stay there. I'm really glad though that I had other opportunities and took them and became a registered nurse and ventured off into the world. But had I not had these other opportunities, I likely would have stayed there forever. So at the company that I worked for, I was doing night shift, and eventually I wanted to get to a place where I was doing another shift. And I transitioned over to evening shift. And evening shift is pretty hectic too. Because you have this time frame when you start your evening shift to when everybody goes to bed. Dinner, you have one meal, because I worked like the 3 to 11 shift. So we had a meal that we had to get through. We had 2 med passes, of course. So you had your evening and your bedtime med pass. And we had a lot of stuff go on in the evening shift too, because after people start going to bed is when your people with memory deficits start waking up and acting up. It's true. It really is true. Evening and night are very hectic. Day shift is hectic in a different way. There's a lot of busy work to do on day shift. I've worked all 3 shifts. In day shift, you have that morning med pass and that noon med pass. You got to get your documentation done. You got to call the doctors. You got to make sure all the labs got done, and you got to call the doctors. When you get here on evening shift, you need to follow up with those labs that probably didn't come through, because it seems like labs didn't show up on the printer until at the end of the day. And as you know, if you work in a long-term care facility, you've got to call the doctor's office, report the INR, and you had to get a new Coumadin dose if you needed to, or if there were critical labs, you needed to call the doctor and get new orders. And in a skilled nursing facility, you do hang IVs, and you do IV medications, and you do give injections for, I think I gave a lot of vitamin K when I worked in skilled nursing. We also gave lorazepam IM and Haldol IM back when I was a baby nurse. You don't do that so much anymore. It's not really common anymore because that's a chemical restraint now. But back when I was a baby nurse, we gave that to people when they were acting up at night. Now we redirect them. And honestly, it's okay. It's probably better, because I think in working as a nurse all these years, what I've learned is when you do give them that lorazepam, sometimes it doesn't stop the behavior. It just makes them now a fall risk with the behavior. And I would rather not have anybody fall. So I worked evening shift. I would come in, take report from the day shift nurse. I would make a list of the things that I needed to do, the doctors that I needed to call the doctor before I started my med pass. So if I was lucky, the day shift nurse would have made that cart ready to go for me. Didn't always happen. There are some nurses that just don't care about what you're going to do. Even knowing that night shift will often set the cart up for day shift often doesn't set the cart up for evening shift. And there's always these shift wars, which is a shame, because we're all working in the same building taking care of the same people. But I have seen really effective teamwork between shifts, and I have seen places where there are just shift wars where everybody just blames the other shift for what went wrong on their own shift. And honestly, when you're taking care of people, you just can't get everything done in 8 hours sometimes. It's just a fact. Things happen. We're dealing with people, not robots, and you can have the best intentions and get little thing to death to where you just can't accomplish everything you need to do. And something that I learned working in the facility that I worked is that I had to learn how to prioritize what definitely had to be done, what needed to be done more than other things, and what could be passed along, because I had to get those top priority things done for sure, and after that I could do the other things that were important, and after that, if it wasn't critical, it might be getting passed along to the next shift, because We were a 24-hour facility, and I was one person trying to get all these tasks done for, I feel like I had 22 to 32 patients depending on census in the building. And in evening shift, you generally have one nurse. I worked in a facility that had 3 hallways, and you have one nurse that would be per hall and 2 CNAs per hall, or sometimes there was 1 CNA per hall and a float between 2 halls. Your Medicare hall was always very well staffed because they were your post-surgical people, your people that were getting physical therapy, and your people that were there short term. So they had really good staffing on that unit. Your long-term units, unfortunately, were not always staffed as well, and we were always told not to use the term short-staffed because by state guidelines, we were staffed adequately. I don't know who makes those guidelines, but if anybody that works for state sees this, it's not adequate to have 2 CNAs to 30 people and get their food out to them hot if they need to be fed. It's not adequate. And it's very hard sometimes to get everybody turned and repositioned and also take a break during your shift. And we're often told also to take our breaks. I often go off on a tangent on these things just because I worked in long-term care for so many years. But evening shift, I knew I had to come in, look at the labs, find what was critical, call the doctor's office, and hope they called me back, because sometimes they would not call you back until the next day. We didn't have cell phones at that time. Cell phones were something that was just becoming popular when I was a nurse, and it became popular during my career, but that is not something that we had. We had to call the doctor's office on the phone, speak to a doctor's office nurse or their I don't want to say secretary, but it was the person answering the phone. And we would give the message of the lab value and hope that the doctor would call us back, because if they didn't, the day shift was going to be agitated with you that you didn't address that. But I learned that critical INRs were something that had to be addressed with no ifs, ands, or buts, so that I did make sure that I always called the doctor on those things. And the doctor would tell you what dose of Coumadin to give, if you needed to hold it that night. And so when I took orders, becoming a nurse, at that time, you had telephone order sheets that had triplicates. So there was a white copy, a yellow copy, and a pink copy. And the pink copy was the thing that ended up staying in the chart. I think the white copy always had to go back to the doctor for signature. So you had to write what the doctor said to you on the phone about the order that you were going to do, and after you put it in the telephone order and put it in the chart, you would flag it for the doctor to sign, or for medical records to take it for the doctor to sign, and then you would put it in the MAR, the medication administration record. We had paper documentation back then, not computers, so we had to handwrite the order, cross out the old order, or highlight through it to indicate that it was no longer an active order. Then we had to go to the medicine cart and pull out the old dosage of medication, and we had something called a convenience box. We didn't have Pyxis back when I was starting as a nurse. We had a little lockbox with, like a little tackle box with drawers in it with pills and baggies. The pills had the dosage written on them, the expiration date, and what they were, and you had a book that you looked at, and it told you the number of the drawer that the pill was in, and you would write the pill into the book and how many you took, so that the facility would get billed by the pharmacy for those medications. You would return those other doses to the pharmacy so that they could destroy them. And on evening shift, pharmacy would come. They would bring the new cards of medications for new orders. They would bring refills, and they would bring controls. And we didn't have a Pyxis where you did a count automatically. We had to count with 2 nurses, one nurse coming on, one nurse going off. And that's the way it was done. And when you accepted a control, you had to sign for the pharmacy that you accepted a control, and the nurse that you worked with on the shift that you were on would sign with you that you did in fact receive this medication. And we had this narc book. It was our book that we used to count the narcotics. You know, becoming a nurse, as I said before, taught me accountability. We learned to document very heavily. And narcotics had to be counted every shift, coming on and going off. And some nurses would not want to count. They would say, yeah, okay, I believe you. I don't believe you. I don't believe you. We're going to count this cart. Because I have seen nurses who don't count, and it is frightening when a pill goes missing and you can't account for where it went. Oftentimes you can do a little investigation and figure out that it in fact was given to a patient and somebody didn't document it. Now with electronic charting, it's not impossible in a long-term care to not be able to find that information out, because sometimes people still don't document. I think what is helpful is the facilities who have a Pyxis style where they have to actually count the drug that they take out. I don't think that's common in a facility because we have a lockbox with medications in it standardly. So it is still possible that people don't document when they gave a narcotic medication to a patient, and it's frightening. So I don't believe you. We're going to do count. You're not getting out of here early. You're not leaving without, and I'm not taking your keys until you verify with me that this medication count is correct, because I learned that I am responsible for my license. And you work hard to get it, right? You work hard to get your license, so it's important to take those extra steps to keep it. I have seen nurses who have lost their license, and it's very sad. It's very sad because you can be held accountable and lose your license if you're not checking yourself and doing what you're supposed to do. Away from the serious stuff, working evening shift in that facility, I worked with really great CNAs. I loved my CNAs so much. And you know, they had big personalities. And I did not have a big personality. I was pretty quiet and fairly shy when I started as a nurse. I still don't like to talk in big groups. It's not my thing. I can talk to you one-on-one. I can do, communication. I love to do education with new staff. I love to do education with my patients. But if you put me in front of a group of people, I get shy, and I don't like to talk in front of people. It makes me terribly nervous. And I used to have that same feeling when I would have to call a doctor as well. I hated to talk on the phone. I still hate to talk on the phone. I hate to call people and talk on the phone because I feel like sometimes I say the wrong things. But I worked with really amazing CNAs, and I've lost touch with most of them, unfortunately, with moving and things like that. But a lot of them became nurses and went on with a career, and they were younger than me. And I like peep them because they're on my Facebook and Instagram sometimes, and I peep them and I'm like, wow, they were just baby CNAs when I started with them. I think that's something that I learned in nursing too. We learned we would see something, do something, and then teach something. That is how nurses do it. We train each other. We learn it, we do it, and then we teach it to the next person. And I did a lot of training in that career and in that facility. And I worked with a lot of CNAs that went on to school to become nurses, and I am so proud of them. Some of them are nurse practitioners now too. They've surpassed their teacher. But I really learned teamwork, and I think that's why I stayed in that building for 11 years, because I had loved working with those people, and I had loved the team that I had built. And I think I've spent a lot of years searching for that same feeling in other jobs. But I'm really glad that I started there in skilled nursing. And I think that every nurse has a niche. Every nurse has a place where they should be. And I think it's important to figure that out and do that in your career so that you're happy in what you're doing. I think most of us start out very passionate about it. I was very passionate about long-term care for many, many years, and I loved working in that facility for that company. I loved the managers that I had, even when I complained about them or was irritated by them. I loved the other nurses that I worked with, and I knew what I was coming into. And I think that was the allure of that job, was coming in and knowing what to expect. And I think that's why I love long-term care so much, even though people are not robots and they don't have the same routine every day. In a long-term care setting, you kind of develop the same routine every day, and then you have the adventures that happen during your shift, and you learn to work around those. I think that my experience working that facility also taught me flexibility, because I had to learn that maybe I wasn't always going to get my medication pass done on time, especially if somebody fell and hurt themselves, or if somebody had emergent symptoms where I had to send them to the hospital or call the doctor. Or, occasionally we had patients that would elope outside of the door and we would have to bring them back in. I don't think anybody ever got away from me when I was in that facility, but we had people who tried all the time. So I learned flexibility. I learned that everything is not going to go the way you think it should go, and you have to learn to roll with it. And I think that doing 11 years in that facility as an LPN really helped me form my personality as a nurse and prepare me for other roles. And so I could talk about it forever. It's endless, and I probably will talk about it a lot. So if you have any questions, comments, things that you're curious about that's happened in 28 years, I would be happy to answer it in the comments. And if you like my chaotic style and my stories and my humor, please consider liking, subscribing, and following, and come back for some more. I hope to see you soon.